Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. There are two problems in America that we could solve today and that would unify the American people. First is the problem of gun violence and related forms of criminal violence. And second is the problem of disenfranchisement and unresolved struggles for political democracy and equal rights in the country. No one is in favor of lethal gun violence, and everyone should be in favor of full democratic inclusion and participation. And yet, rather than working together to solve these two problems, which we could easily do, our GOP colleagues would simply use the existence of one problem to block the solution of the other while doing nothing to address either of them. When a mass shooter guns down 3 children and 3 adults, as happened on Monday in Nashville, or a mass murderer assassinates 10 people at a supermarket in Buffalo, or a racist killer massacres 23 people and wounds 22 others at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, or a gunman murders a DC Metro Transit employee trying to protect riders from the armed attacker, as happened in Washington last month. These acts of deranged criminal violence should be a spur to immediate nationwide bipartisan action to pass a universal violent criminal background check on the sale of all firearms in the United States of America, a measure supported by more than 90% of the American people. And it should be a spur to ban military-style weapons of war on the streets of America, in the schools and churches, and in the supermarkets and shopping malls. And this will work. And how do we know it will work? Well, America has the loosest, most permissive and liberal gun laws in the world, and we have a rate of gun violence unseen in the rest of the industrialized world. Firearm homicide rates are 22 times greater here than in Europe. We're the only industrialized nation where gun violence is the leading cause of death for children. If we took the actions that our counterparts have taken from Canada to Japan to Australia, we would dramatically lower the rates of gun death in America. The states with the strictest gun laws today have the lowest rates of gun homicide, and the states with the loosest gun laws have the highest rates of gun homicide. But alas, our GOP colleagues throw up their hands. They bewail and bemoan the existence of evil in the world, as if we were cloistered theologians rather than responsible public officials. And they say there is nothing, just nothing that we can do to stop criminal gun violence. Our dear colleague, Congressman Tim Burchett, is a genuinely decent and beloved man around here. And even he just gave voice to this pervasive and shocking sense of capitulation and surrender among our colleagues to the monstrous problem of criminal gun violence. After Monday's mass shooting at a Christian school in Nashville, he said, "It's a horrible, horrible situation, and we're not going to fix it." He said, "Criminals are going to be criminals." But even worse than this fatalistic surrender to criminal violence in America is the decision today to use the stubborn pervasiveness of criminal violence everywhere in America as an excuse to deny people in one community their basic rights as Americans to participate in representative government on an equal basis. And that's what's happening in this hearing. The more than 700,000 U.S. citizens living in Washington, D.C. pay more taxes per capita than the people of each of the 50 states. They have fought in every war from the American Revolution forward. They are draftable. They are subject to all the laws of the country. And yet they've had no voting representation in the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate since passage of the Organic Act in 1801, although they did win the right to participate in presidential elections in 1961 with passage of the 23rd Amendment. But they're disenfranchised in Congress. The only residents of a national capital on planet Earth who are not represented in their own national legislature, and they're fighting a crime problem that Americans are fighting everywhere, from Washington to Louisville, Kentucky, to Bakersville, California. Yet when violent insurrectionists came to this chamber on January 6, 2021, the people of Washington, as Capitol officers, as officers in the Metropolitan Police Department, as staffers and as citizens, rallied to the defense of the Republic and the very Congress that they cannot participate in as voting members. If anyone had an authentic political grievance against the Union, it would be them. But no, they stood up to defend the Congress and the Vice President against a violent mob of rebels without a cause and rebels without a clue who savagely attacked our police officers. And now, the very same members who have come together today to denounce crime in Washington and the response of the D.C. government that they know very little about are astonishingly many of the same members who visited violent criminals in the D.C. jail and praised them as heroes and political prisoners as if they were Nelson Mandela or Alexei Navalny. What an obscenity and what a disgrace to this institution. In any event, the people of Washington never attacked our body or our officers. They're demanding change the right way. They organized a statehood convention and a statehood referendum in 2016, and they petitioned us for admission to the Union. The House voted in both the 116th and the 117th Congresses to grant their petition for admission to statehood. The Senate failed to act in both cases. Their petition is in the mainstream of our history. Statehood admission has been a driving force behind the growth of American democracy, from a union of 13 to a union of 50 states. The vast majority of the members of the House, 307 of us, represent people living in states that were admitted by Congress under Article 4, rather than people living in one of the original 13 states that ratified the Constitution, who are represented by only 128 representatives. I happen to be one of those, but all of us have equal votes, regardless of whether we were one of the first or we were one of the most recent states to be admitted. In the process of state admissions, all kinds of objections have been raised. We said Utah was too Mormon, New Mexico too Catholic. Other candidates were thought too poor, too big, too small. Hawaii and Alaska were non-contiguous, so they were obviously too far away and unqualified. Texas was its own country, and where does it say we could admit a whole country as a state? Representatives complained that too many people in Arizona spoke Spanish, and Senator Beveridge, chairman of the Committee on Territory, said that they were likely to be traitors and un-American. Louisiana was way too French. And one of the main criticisms leveled against almost every community has been that the people there were too wild, too criminal, and too ruffian to be admitted. And of course, beneath the surface, there's always been the quicksand of racial, religious, and ethnic animosity and hatred. But the amazing and redeeming fact of American history has been that ultimately all of these irrational, non-constitutional, and arbitrary objections have been swept away in favor of the great democratic imperative embodied in the first three words of the Constitution, we the people. And the Declaration of Independence set forth the beautiful, self-evident truths that have guided us as a country. All Americans born equal, all of us having unalienable rights, including the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, government existing only on the consent of the governed, and nobody should be governed or taxed without their own direct representation. This hearing, called to malign the people of D.C. and their leaders for criminal violence that our colleagues will do nothing to stop, should instead be a hearing to examine and move statehood for the people of Washington, D.C. in the 118th Congress. And I know there will be lots of criticisms against this or that provision of D.C. law, this or that budgetary decision or policy decision, but all of it is quite beside the point. The people of Washington are an independent, self-governing community who want their statehood. And you no more have to agree with every law or government decision in Washington than you have to agree with every law or government decision in Louisiana or California or Massachusetts or New Mexico or Alaska or Texas. In democracy, people have a right to make their own decisions and even the right sometimes to make their own mistakes. Is there a state in the Union that has not made a policy mistake? I'm certain there's not a member of this committee who would want every law and policy of your state or their localities to be examined and reviewed by the representatives of every other state whenever they think it's in their political interest to do that. Have our colleagues so given up on the possibility of making real progress together on reducing gun violence in America as a whole, that they would prefer to turn the Congress of the U.S. into a 535-person city council, the largest city council on earth, just to bedevil and harass the people of Washington, D.C. Let these people have their equal rights. Let them have their democracy. I thank all of our witnesses for being here today. I thank the people of D.C. for your patience and determination as we work to secure statehood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.